Imagine one man controlling so much of a nation's oil that the government had to step in and forcibly break his empire apart. Imagine being so rich that your personal wealth, adjusted for today's money, would make Elon Musk look like a middle-class accountant. Imagine building a dynasty so powerful that, over a century later, your family name still echoes through the boardrooms, the banks, and the political halls of the most powerful nation on Earth. But before we uncover how the Rockefellers built the greatest financial empire in American history, welcome to Money Records, where money, power, and history collide. That man was John D. Rockefeller. And this is the story of how one family, starting from absolute poverty, built the greatest financial dynasty America has ever seen. Our story begins not in a mansion, not in a private school, but in a modest farmhouse in Richford, New York in the year 1839. John Davison Rockefeller was born into a family of very limited means. His father, William Rockefeller, was a traveling salesman, charming, reckless, and frequently absent. His mother, Eliza, was deeply religious, hard-working, and the true backbone of the household. From a very young age, John absorbed two things from his parents: his mother's discipline and work ethic, and a burning desire to never be financially helpless, the way his family so often was. By the age of 7, John was already raising turkeys and selling them to neighbors. By 12, he had saved up enough money to loan a small sum to a local farmer, at interest. Even as a child, Rockefeller understood something most people never figure out in a lifetime: money should work for you, not the other way around. He kept a personal ledger from the age of 16, a small notebook where he recorded every single cent he earned and every cent he spent. He called that notebook Ledger A, and he kept it until the day he died. This obsessive discipline over money would become the foundation of everything that followed. After finishing school, Rockefeller took a job as a bookkeeper in Cleveland, Ohio. He was 16 years old, and he was already preparing for something much bigger. In 1859, everything changed, not just for Rockefeller, but for the entire world. Oil was struck in Titusville, Pennsylvania, and almost overnight, a new industry was born. Rockefeller was 20 years old. He watched the chaos of the early oil boom carefully. Hundreds of men rushed to drill, pumping crude oil out of the ground and selling it as fast as they could. Prices swung wildly. Fortunes were made and lost in a matter of weeks. Most people in that situation would have jumped in immediately. Rockefeller waited. Instead of drilling, he invested in oil refining, the process of turning crude oil into usable kerosene for lamps. This was the smarter play. Drillers depended on luck. Refiners depended on efficiency, and efficiency was something Rockefeller understood better than anyone. In 1863, at just 24 years old, he opened his first oil refinery in Cleveland. By 1868, it was the largest refinery in the world. But Rockefeller wasn't finished. In 1870, he founded the Standard Oil Company of Ohio. And then began one of the most aggressive business campaigns in all of American history. Rockefeller's strategy was simple and ruthless. He approached competing oil refiners with a choice: sell your company to Standard Oil, or watch us drive you out of business. He negotiated secret deals with railroads, getting heavily discounted shipping rates that his competitors simply could not match. He cut costs so efficiently that Standard Oil could sell its product cheaper than anyone else and still make a profit. One by one, competitors folded, sold, or collapsed. By 1880, just 10 years after founding Standard Oil, Rockefeller controlled approximately 90% of all oil refining in the United States. Let that sink in. 9 out of every 10 barrels of refined oil in America passed through a Rockefeller company. He had not just succeeded in business. He had effectively become the American oil industry. A monopoly of that scale was impossible to ignore. Journalists began investigating. A woman named Ida Tarbell, whose own father's business had been crushed by Standard Oil, published a series of devastating investigative articles exposing the company's backroom deals and cutthroat tactics. Public outrage grew. In 1890, the United States government passed the Sherman Antitrust Act, a law designed specifically to break up monopolies like Standard Oil. But legal battles took time, and Rockefeller continued to expand. Finally, in 1911, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that Standard Oil was an illegal monopoly and ordered it to be broken up into 34 separate companies. It was one of the most landmark legal decisions in American history. Here is the twist that almost no one expects. The breakup actually made Rockefeller richer. He owned shares in all 34 successor companies. When those companies were freed from the parent organization and began competing independently, their stock values soared. Almost overnight, Rockefeller's personal wealth doubled. The government's attempt to punish him had inadvertently handed him the largest single windfall of his life. By 1913, John D. Rockefeller's net worth was estimated at approximately $900 million, equivalent to roughly $25 to $30 billion in today's money by simple inflation adjustment. But as a share of the entire American economy at that time, historians estimate his real equivalent wealth would exceed $400 billion in today's terms. No American before or since has ever come close. But wealth alone does not make a dynasty. What made the Rockefellers different was the deliberate and structured way John D. passed his fortune and his values down through the generations. He raised his son, John D. Rockefeller Jr., with the same ledger discipline he had practiced himself. Jr. went on to become one of America's greatest philanthropists, donating land for the construction of the United Nations headquarters in New York City and restoring the historic colonial district of Williamsburg, Virginia. Jr. had 5 sons, the famous Rockefeller brothers, and each of them extended the family's reach into different corridors of power. Nelson Rockefeller became governor of New York and vice president of the United States. Winthrop became governor of Arkansas. Lawrence became a major venture capitalist, one of the earliest investors in what would become the modern airline industry. David Rockefeller rose to become the CEO of Chase Manhattan Bank, one of the most powerful financial institutions in the world, and spent decades as an unofficial American diplomat, meeting privately with foreign leaders and heads of state across the globe. And John D. Rockefeller III dedicated his life to cultural and philanthropic causes, founding the Asia Society and helping to establish Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts in New York. This was not a family that spent their wealth. This was a family that deployed it, strategically, deliberately, and with a long-term vision that most people simply cannot comprehend. The companies born from the breakup of Standard Oil did not disappear. They evolved. ExxonMobil, today one of the largest corporations on Earth, is a direct descendant of Standard Oil. So is Chevron. So is BP's American operations. The infrastructure Rockefeller built over a lifetime quite literally powers the modern world. Beyond oil, the Rockefeller family's fingerprints are on modern American medicine, education, and global diplomacy. The University of Chicago was founded with a $35 million Rockefeller donation. The Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, today known as Rockefeller University, pioneered countless breakthroughs in modern medicine. And the Rockefeller Foundation, established in 1913, remains one of the most influential private philanthropic organizations in the world, funding public health initiatives, agricultural development, and social programs across more than 100 countries. Here is what the story of the Rockefellers really teaches us. Wealth at its most powerful is not about what you spend. It is about what you build. John D. Rockefeller did not start with connections, or privilege, or inherited money. He started with a ledger, a relentless work ethic, and a long-term vision that most people around him simply could not see. And unlike so many great fortunes in history, which crumble by the 3rd generation, the Rockefellers engineered their dynasty to last. Not through secrecy, but through discipline, structure, and purpose. Statistically, 90% of wealthy families lose everything by the 3rd generation. The Rockefellers are now in their 6th. That is not luck. That is a system. And understanding that system, how wealth is built, preserved, and multiplied across generations, is one of the most powerful things any person can learn.